morning, everyone, to our March meeting of the Curriculum Committee. Thank you all for joining us, and we have three members here, Dr. Block and Ms. Brooks, and we have Dr. Feeney and Dr. Kernan and Dr. Hines as well. We are here to discuss the Port Enrichment Program, and without further ado, we will turn it over to Dr. Feeney and Dr. Kernan.
Thank you, Ms. Melpomene. We're very excited to be able to talk a little bit about the PEP program, some of the background of the program, its current structure, and some of the exciting things that are happening right now as we prep to do this presentation. Introduce Dr. Burdick, who's been overseeing this.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here today. It's good to see everybody. Why don't we dive right into PEP, Port Enrichment Program. The program, as it's currently constituted, is made up of 6 teachers, 1 at each of our elementary schools and 1 at Weber Middle School. And this presentation doesn't happen without them and their input and their dedication to this program, so I want to make sure to acknowledge them. The goals of the PEP program, this, by the way, pulled off of our website. There'll be a link later in the program, so when this goes live, anybody can log on and click on the link. The goals dovetail beautifully with actually the portrait of a graduate, our North Star. So I don't know if you want a moment to look at the goals, or if we can kind of move past and you can circle back at your reading. So we want to try to crystallize down the PEP program. What are the aspects of the program that I would want you to leave with? If you're left with, there's a comprehensive presentation here, but we want to make sure that there are some things that everybody knows about PEP. And so that's PEP fundamentals. And the first, and maybe the most important, is that PEP is designed for all students, grades K through 5. And then students who choose to at the middle school as well, grades 6, 7, and 8. Right? All students in grades K through 5 are exposed to PEP. And it's critical that everybody understands that. PEP is divided into 2 components, whole class enrichment and core group. The vast majority of students in grades K through 5 are going to be exposed to PEP through whole class enrichment. There are multiple on-ramps for PEP core group. Students can qualify for the core group in grades 3, 4, 5, and 6. We pay a lot of attention to what happens in grade 3. And I think for the right reasons, it's appropriate, but it's important to know that this is not a system that leaves students behind. This is a system that allows for students to become part of the core group later on, grades 4, 5, and 6. PEP is always evolving. You're going to see a little bit more about the evolution of PEP, but this is very much an iterative process. The PEP teachers are constantly looking at their program and constantly evaluating on 2 sides. One is the curricular side. Right? There is a constant evolution of curriculum. I think that makes perfect sense. Our children continue to evolve. Their needs continue to evolve. We need to keep evolving to meet those needs. But there's also an evolution in how students get into the core group. You'll see more about that as this presentation goes on. The district has a standing PEP subcommittee that is made up of teachers and administrators. I don't want anybody to think that there is 6 PEP teachers and myself and they concoct everything that happens. Any of the plans that we put forth have to go to the PEP subcommittee. They have to get presented there, and the subcommittee has to approve them. That is a subcommittee that is part of PGCD, and this is an important part of the process. So I want to make sure that you have some fundamentals for PEP. Just some historical context. This program has been around since 1974, named PEP in 1990. There have been reviews done in the past, one by Suffolk Boces in 1996. We're going to talk about briefly another review that was done in 2016, 2017. Important to note in terms of notable events is the changing structure of PEP, particularly from, say, 2012 forward, right? So there were staffing reductions in 2012, and during those times, we had students who were bused for core group to different schools, depending on the number of teachers. It was a challenging time to be a PEP teacher. In fact, the PEP review done in 2016 was during one of those periods, right? So, meaning like her first day on our district grounds, she actually went to Sousa to do an observation, and it was the first day that kids were being bused to core group. And I only know that story because it was told to me the other day by the teacher that presented a challenging time. It was an interesting time for PEP. 2019, 2020, staffing gets increased, right? 4 teachers for 5 elementary schools, 0.8 at Weber. Right, so we're still not quite at full staffing. 2020, 2021, staffing goes to 5, but there's no Weber staffing. And then 2021, 22, we are back at 1 teacher at every elementary school and 0.8 at Weber. And of course, during that same period of time, we were dealing with the impact of the pandemic, right? So I want to really point out those last couple of years, 2019 through today, we're talking about constant change. Every time there's a change in the PEP staffing, there has to be a change in the PEP curriculum. How we deliver instruction, how we deliver units to children, that has to change. That means the PEP teachers have to go back, figure out, how do we do this piecemeal? How do we deliver it again? And I wanted to make sure to point that out, because it's really a credit to the PEP teachers that they're able to go back and continually revise what it is they're doing and how they're delivering it. So we mentioned that there was a PEP review in 2016, 2017 that was conducted by Dr. Joyce Mantassa Basca of the College of William and Mary. You can see her research goals are up on the board. I don't think we need to go through them. Her review was thorough, and it did come with, I want to point out that it did come with some commendations about our program, but we wanted to focus on her recommendations. So here are some of the recommendations that we made. We broke them out into recommendations that are implemented, being implemented, and still to be addressed. One of her recommendations was to redesign the student selection model for core group, including the redesign of the SES, that's the student evaluation scale. The redesigns she recommended were adopted in 2018. We'll talk more about that in a moment or two. She recommended a change in the current elementary model. Remember, she did this review in 2016, so we were not at 5 at teacher in each of the elementary schools. So those suggestions were adopted. She recommended expanding enrichment to all grades starting in kindergarten. That is absolutely what happens now. She also recommended opening up lunchtime enrichment at Weber to all students, and lunchtime enrichment is open at Weber to all students. There are some recommendations that are currently being implemented. Develop core group selection criteria and student identification to expressly identify students from underrepresented groups. This is a challenging topic. You'll hear more about what we're trying to do to address this in a little later in the presentation. This is an ongoing challenge for PEP, and I think, beyond PEP for the rest of the district. And to create deliberate vertical articulation to identify a clear trajectory for advanced students. Where do we expect our PEP core group students are going to go after core group ends? Right? How do we articulate that trajectory? What is that expectation for us? How do we then explain that to the community? How do we give that information to parents? It would be fair of us to be able to say, this is where we think PEP core group students go, and that I think helps parents inform their own choices and their decision-making for their children. Things that are still to be addressed. Aligning PEP and grade level curriculum with PEP and regular classroom teachers to avoid redundancy. I don't want to say that that doesn't happen at all. It just doesn't happen everywhere. and I think this is some area that we can improve. Provide professional development for all teachers working with gifted and talented students. This you'll see later as something that we would like to work on expressly for PEP teachers, but we think we should also be working on that for all teachers. We also should be collecting data through high school for core group students to determine those trajectories. I want to just compare those two, right? One is about identifying where students go from, say, 5th or 6th grade up. And then we should also be looking from 12th grade graduation back down. And this is an opportunity for us to evaluate our own program to say, okay, let's look at the graduating senior class. Where did PEP kids finish? And then if we see something that, whatever the data speaks to us, we can then determine what supports might need to be provided, especially if what we imagine the trajectory is doesn't necessarily meet where we finish. So I think we can learn more about our own program by developing a more complete data collection and analysis method. Our current program. Elementary program overview. There are some important pieces to this. PEP teachers work with all classes for 2 or more 6-session groups throughout the year. That's K through 5. That means all classes in every grade, K through 5, PEP teacher will push into as part of whole class enrichment. The units of study go beyond the normal curriculum. The idea is to provide challenging material to further enrich students' experiences. It's also important to note that due to some differences in school sizes, core group size, room availability, that not all of the available units will be experienced at each grade or school. We can sort of talk more about that a little bit later. In the core group, grades 4 and 5, instruction to qualifying 4th and 5th grade students. Students meet with the PEP teacher in a pull-out format for a total of 2 hours and 15 minutes per week. The Weber program overview. Core group is for grades 6 students only. It is included as part of the student schedule. It's not a pull-out and meets every other day. Probably worthwhile just to do maybe a sentence or two. In a pull-out program, students leave, instruction in the classroom continues. In a non-pull-out program, scheduled like in grade 6, students go to a class, they're not missing anything else, right? All the students are going to other classes. So that's how Weber 6th grade separate is different than the elementary model. Lunchtime enrichment, grade 6 has an opportunity every day, grade 7 and 8 every other day. That really started during COVID and has continued. It's been good interest, really strong interest from students for lunchtime enrichment. It's open to all students and provides enrichment opportunities in a variety of topics. Whole class enrichment. We wanted to give you a sense of the available units at each of the grade levels. Now again, this is just to review back to a few slides ago, that the whole class enrichment is at least 2 units per grade level for whole class enrichment, right? So here we have 4 units listed. It's going to be at least 2. It could be more. And there are going to be factors that impact that. So just to give you an idea, and you're going to see computer coding is going to come up at each of the levels. The PEP teachers wanted me to make sure, you'll see it's something that they're proud of, that students are coding K through 5 at every level. Here's 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th, and 5th grade. Here's a glimpse of lunchtime enrichment. Some of this has already been said, right? Open to all students. Allow students to socialize and engage in challenging activities at the same time. This includes math and piano as well. The core group curriculum is, I want to just share, here are the units that get covered at all the schools. It has a little less variability, right? So all the grade 4 students in PEP core group will have units in biodiversity, cells, DNA, genetics, and optics. If time permits, you might see computer coding, codes, and cipers, and logic. Same in grade 5. Those are the topics that are absolutely going to be covered, and then if time permits, there'll be other topics like engineering, computer coding, and robotics. I just want to go back one slide. It says topics are selected by the PEP teachers to best meet the needs and interests of their core groups. The PEP teachers work together to create the topics for core group PEP. They do the same for PEP enrichment. So it might be, especially in the whole class enrichment, where one of the PEP teachers will surface a unit that they think might be interesting. And they might field test it in their own school and then bring back the results to the PEP teacher group. The PEP teachers meet regularly, at least once a month. And this is one of the things that they would discuss. And then they would make a determination about bringing something in, expanding it to the other 4 schools. And then they would figure out how to do it. So it's not as if in the core group especially that the PEP teachers are saying, well, I think my students in grade 4 would benefit from logic and not biodiversity. That's not how that happens. But they want me to make sure they're working together to create curriculum together and bring things forward. Weber core group, grade 6 only, 1 period every other day. I already explained it is part of the schedule, and here are the units that are included. Okay, qualifying for PEP core group. We tried really hard to make this as, as simple an explanation as possible. So we'll walk through this, right? To earn an invitation to the PEP core group, a student needs to earn 4 qualifying points in this process. The first part of the process, the first part is what happens before individual IQ testing. Students can earn a maximum of 3 points. All right, so here's how the timeline works. On the spring of 2nd grade, all 2nd grade teachers complete a student evaluation scale for each of the students in their class. All students in grade 3 in the fall take the nonverbal assessment, and they have to score over a 130 in order to earn that point. And then in the winter of grade 3 teachers complete a student evaluation scale for all of the students in their classes. Students who earn 2 of those 3 qualifying scores are evaluated using an individual IQ test. All right, so there's a maximum of 3 points. Students who are IQ tested, they're given an individual IQ test. We are back to doing those in person, I might add. And that IQ test produces 3 scores. So one is a full scale or GAI, General Ability Index. That sounds like 2 scores. The teachers take the higher of the 2 scores and they discard the lower score. So that's why it's 1 score only. Students also receive a verbal comprehension score and a fluid reasoning score. Depending on the number of points a student has earned before the IQ testing. So if they've earned all 3, right, 2 qualifying scores on the student evaluation scale and a 130 or above on the nonverbal, they need only 1 130 on any of these pieces of the IQ testing. If they have 2, then they need 2 130s in order to qualify. That will get them to 4. Again, students can qualify in grades 4 through 6. They can qualify for IQ testing in grades 4 through 6. We'll explain that in a moment. There is an automatic review process. The automatic review process is only for students who attain an IQ score of 125 or higher. really 125 to 129. Okay, and the automatic review is a point system based on the rubric you see in front of you or up on the board. And students have to earn a total of 12 points or more in order to qualify for core group through automatic review. This is the student evaluation scale. I don't want to say we purposely made it impossible to read on the board. That's just happenstance.
It's impossible to read on this.
Yeah.
Just want you to know, this is the scale. I can't, that's not readable, it's a separate issue. I was told to not, they didn't say produce a readable version. Produce a version.
This is what the teachers fill out.
This is exactly what the teachers fill out. This is filled out for all students in grades 2 and 3. It is also filled out by teachers in grades 4 and 5. Just may not be for all students. Students who are already in core group won't get another student evaluation scale in grades 4 or 5. This is more on an as-needed basis. Right? If there is a need for another data collection point. The student evaluation scale counts as the 2 most recent. So as students enter 4th grade, the 2nd grade SES will fall away, and the 3rd grade SES will become number 1. And if a student should earn enough points, we'll show you how, then the 4th grade teacher will fill out an SES. And the 2 most recent are the ones that will count. And then again, in grade 5, that would happen again. The 3rd grade would fall off, the 4th grade SES, and then there'll be a 5th grade SES. So to qualify for core group in grades 4 through 6, I've read this so many times. So students need 3 of the 4 qualifying scores based on the criteria listed below to move forward in the identification process. That means to move forward to individualized IQ testing. So first you see the student evaluation scale. They need 2 most recent scales, okay? They would also, if they had a 130 or above on the nonverbal that they took in 3rd grade, that would count as 3 of the 4. And after that, we go into the New York State Math Assessment or the NWEA and the New York State ELA or the NWEA. And so based on those scores. So it is possible that a student in grade 4, that when the teachers get the, let's say, New York State assessments in math and ELA, it is possible that a student earns level 4 in both the math and ELA. But they haven't earned a qualifying score on the nonverbal in grade 3. That would mean that the 4th grade teacher would need to produce a student evaluation scale. Right, let's say a student has a 3rd grade scale that meets the qualifying score. The PEP teacher would then go to the 4th grade teacher and have that teacher fill out a student evaluation scale. Now, we wouldn't do that immediately. When we get New York State scores is somewhat variable, but sometime in the fall, it could be late fall.
It's been a better turnaround recently.
PEP teachers would wait a little while, give a 4th grade teacher an opportunity to get to know a child before they're asked to provide them with an evaluation score. But conceivably, mid-fall to late fall is when that score would get produced. And again, earning these points would then qualify a child to be IQ tested. I'm sure there'll be questions about that. We'll come back to those later. Wanted to share with you our demographic representation of students in the core group as it exists today. There's a lot of information on this. I'll do my best to highlight what I think is the most germane for this slide, is that there is disproportionality. You can see along the top part of this graph is the district percentages, male, female, white, Hispanic, Black, Asian, are IEPs, and students with 504s. If you just follow that down, you can see the corresponding percentages at the bottom for our core group students. And we are right there when it comes to our distribution for male and female students. We're just about at the district averages. When we move into white and Hispanic, you can see where the disproportionality exists. I wouldn't want you to think that this is unique to PEP. So provided similar distribution in advanced coursework at other checkpoints in our district. So one is 8th grade algebra. Again, this is as it exists today. So we gave you a couple of different checkpoints: 8th grade algebra, AP US history, AP calculus AB, and AP calculus BC. Those are important because, for example, AP US history is a class that students can elect to take. AP calculus has other prerequisites that go along with it that students have to be in before they can get there. So you can see here again that there is disproportionality, particularly when it comes to representation of our Hispanic population as well. Now, this is important for us, right? Part of what we are going to be working on is looking at trajectories. And so we have an opportunity to learn more about where our students go. But we may be able to address this in other ways as well. And let me go into a pilot program that we started this year. So we've been working on a pilot program that runs alongside of our traditional PEP core group identification system. Right? We are using this simply as a pilot, and we're going to be comparing the results of the pilot this year to the results that we get from our current model to look for any differences. The goal of the pilot is, well, there are multiple goals. One is that we have an opportunity to find a more representative group of students to be identified for our core group. That's one of the goals. We're not sure that that's going to happen, but it is certainly one of the goals, and the company that we're working with, that's one of their goals as well. We also have an opportunity to streamline our core group identification process. So our students in 3rd grade already take one whole group assessment. They take a nonverbal assessment. The pilot will include 2 other 35-minute whole group assessments, one that is verbal, a verbal assessment, another that is quantitative. This will be taken by all of our students. And so the pilot does not include individualized IQ testing. So I just want to point that out, right? In our current model, there are three data points for us: the 2 SESs and the nonverbal, and then there's a gate. And the students that can get through the gate get individualized IQ testing. This model, we take the gate away. All the students will receive all the scores. And this is also beneficial because it allows us to learn more about all of our students, regardless of if they qualify for PEP core group. So our proposed changes to core group selection, I kind of just said this, right? There will still be the student evaluation scale in grade 2. There will still be the student evaluation scale in the spring of grade 3. In between, there would be the nonverbal assessment, the verbal assessment, and the quantitative assessment. And we would get scores across the board. And that would give us a total of 6 data points to determine if students qualify for the core group. I know it looks like 5, but just to go back.
Yeah.
It looks like 5, but so the 3 individual scores will also produce a 4th score.
The
Full
composite.
scale, the composite score, yes.
Got it.
Yes. Final thoughts. The PEP teachers are a modest bunch. I just want to point that out. They are proud of the lot. And I think, I'm going to try to capture, you can certainly read this, they are absolutely proud that all of the students in all the schools, that they get to know every child in all of our elementary schools. And that is an immense source of pride for the PEP teachers as a group. They believe, and I think this bears out, they get to develop relationships, and they get to chart student growth, K through 5. And that, again, I know that it's a source of pride. They are incredibly proud of what they've been able to accomplish throughout the pandemic, throughout all of the staffing changes during that time, to be able to keep the program strong, growing, and evolving. They're incredibly proud of that. They're proud that there is computer coding, K through 5. That is done with absolute intention. They have been working collaboratively with the technology teachers at Weber, so that the Weber technology teachers know the skills that elementary students have as they arrive into Weber, and they're incredibly proud of that as well. And they're proud that they have an ever-evolving program to continue to address student needs. They wanted me to point out robotics for 5th grade this year for all students in 5th grade. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that was supported by the Ed Foundation. There is lots to work on, and you've heard some of that. Right? We want to complete this pilot, and we are excited to compare and see if the pilot does in fact, reveal a more representative group of students who qualify for the core group. So we're excited to be doing that. We want to create a tracking method. We want to track and create a trajectory where we anticipate PEP students go beyond the core group program, and we want to look back on where our students ended their K through 12 experience. We want to work at finding solutions to the barriers that prevent schools from seeing all their enrichment classes for the same amount of time. Right? Some of that is not self-imposed. Some of that is dependent on factors that are as difficult to address as the size of the school building, right, the physical plant, and others could be the variable nature of the number of students in core group depending on the school, and that does change year to year. We want to return our PEP teachers to professional development and connect them to the rich conversation around the country in how to work with gifted and talented students. So we look forward to doing that as well. We want to provide more and important professional development for classroom teachers when it comes to working with students who are gifted and talented. But we also want to work and continue to provide professional development for teachers in completing the student evaluation scale to make sure that we are well organized and consistent in our application. We want to continue to improve our communication with the rest of the community. Currently, there should be information going out to parents after or at the end of units in each of the classes. I see some of that communication, and I'm happy when it is sent out to all the parents. I still think we can be better at that. And so we want to continue to improve our communication with the rest of the community. And I think once we reveal and we find more information about the trajectories, about how successful our students, our PEP students were at the end of high school, and we can provide that information to the community as well. I think that is all, should be a source of pride for us. And we do need, our PEP teachers, they're stretched in a lot of different directions, and one of those areas is they do a lot of data entry. Every score that comes back, they're doing that entry. Every minute of time that they're spending doing data entry, that's a minute of time that they are not with students. And so we need to address that as well so that we can maximize the amount of time that they're with children. It's my favorite slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was quite thorough. Just to be clear to the committee and to this fantastic audience, I was informed that this room is taken at 10:30. So just keep that in mind as we have our conversation. So thank you very much for this. This was quite thorough and informative. And as usual, I would like to pass it on to my committee members for comment or question.
I have, you want to go first? You want me to-
I think mine is short.
Go ahead.
So first, thank you. I wrote down a couple of questions throughout and, and I'll tell you what those questions are and then I'll tell you that you answered them throughout the presentation. So I'm going to only ask one follow-up question. The questions that I had are, right, you talked about multiple on-ramps in the PEP core group and I wrote down, what are they? Are they the right ones? What kind of programs you use? And I thought you answered those in really complete detail. And then at the beginning, it was like, I saw the great pictures, and I was like, well, what is the curriculum? And I thought you guys did a really nice job answering that. So the only question that I really have is, in terms of like the, how students get identified and what is the curriculum, we were very focused, which is like, this is what we do and it all seems reasonable. But we have a bunch of districts that are around us that are probably doing similar programs, and I just wanted to hear like a comparison between what we are doing, if you have any sense, and what some of the other districts around us are doing.
One is, I think that's one of your questions, one of the reasons why we need to push our PEP teachers back out, so that they can be connected, not just nationally, but certainly locally with our surrounding districts. So I can't give you an exact, comparison. I can say that a lot of the time that we've invested in the last year in looking at other districts is about connected to the pilot and connected to how do we determine what qualifies a student to be part of a pullout, right? Other districts that have pullouts. So we've been looking at how other districts do it to see what we can learn from them. So we've been focused on that side. We would love to be focused on the curricular side. I think that's what the PEP teachers want to devote their time. And so hopefully we can get back to that. But I can certainly ask them to provide some comparison to get back.
Sure, thank you.
Certainly.
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Is it?
So thank you very, very much. I'm actually going to start with my last question that I wrote down. Given all the work that the district has put into this over the past year, including the additional professional development, I don't know the name of the company you brought in to give the recommendations for the pilot. That's actually one of my questions. Can I understand fairly that this is a program worth keeping and improving? We're doing this because we believe, the district believes in this program and wants to improve it, rather than, let's just see if it's really worth it and then maybe we'll scrap it. I'm trying to get understanding, because every year that we've been through this, and going back to 2012, where not only was the staff cut, but the hours that the kids were able to be in the core group and whole class enrichment were cut. And it had started, the core group had started the third grade. Literally, the kids were in core group in the third grade, so that was cut too. So every year there's this angst over, is it gonna be whittled away, and then we kind of go back, and then we go whittle away. So I just wanted to understand the direction that the district is taking with respect to this program is to keep it a bona fide program and to strengthen it.
I'd love to answer that. I think the way for me to answer that is to go through some of the talking points that I'd like to share above and beyond what we share, and I think we will. The short answer is yes, okay? But I think there are some things that we have to do. One of the things, and I think many of the parents and the board would agree, it's the first time we actually have an administrator dedicated to overseeing this. So clearly we're taking this very seriously. So that's the first thing. And I want to thank Dr. Kernan for doing that. The second thing is, we've taken the Van Tassel report, which sounds like a real classified report. But we've taken this report and taken it very seriously. And as you can see, we've broken it down into 3 different parts. And there's some things that we still have to do. And I think once all those different components are fulfilled, we are closer to making this the best that it can be. The third has to do with how do we know that it's working? So what are the metrics that we want to develop and focus on, so we can look at short-term and longitudinally if our kids are succeeding and they're flourishing in different ways. The fourth thing is, and we have mentioned this here, but I know it's been brought up several times, is what are we doing for twice exceptional students? And how are we addressing their needs, whether it's taking place within this particular program or at large? My second to last thing has to do with, I don't mean to say this in a way that lands on people the wrong way. If students don't get into PEP, their life will go on, right? And more important, what can we do to support their needs outside of not only enrichment, but certainly if they are not part of the core group? The last thing has to do with the strong, as you can see, there's a very strong MST push. It's really all MST, and very little, if none, as far as zero humanities strands.
Math, science,
And I think, yes, math science, and I think in order for this to really grow and be the best that it can be, it has to incorporate some humanities strand K through 5. I think if all those different edges come together, I think we'll have a really robust program.
Can I also just add on, we had in our admin meeting yesterday, I mentioned to the group that we were going to do that presentation. And several of the elementary principals who've been here for a while were gushing about the changes and how impactful that whole class enrichment has been, which was great for me to hear. I've seen it in action, but you never know how it's landing. And the principals who probably just here for a handful of months, those principals have been here for a number of years, say what a difference. So they see the changes to the program. And then seeing the impact it's had in their buildings, and they're greatly appreciative. And their sense is that people need to know how amazing this program is. And that's, part of the presentation, right? It's a lot of amazing stuff. We're not saying it's perfect. Clearly, our final slide, we've got 8 things we're listing we want to work on. So there's work to be done, but we're proud of so much that's in the program.
And I would just want to add, because the teachers I think would want me to add, they're very proud of what they think of as a multidisciplinary approach to each of these units. So when I had a long conversation with the PEP teachers about coding, and that they think the principles involved in coding translate well to the principles involved in becoming a better writer. There is an organizational structure to how you go about coding, and the best writers they utilize an organizational structure to their writing. They often use a multitude of different stories to introduce their topics, depending on the grade level. And so they would do a much better job than I am doing right now at how that addresses some of what you brought up as it relates to math, science, and technology. Because we do talk about it, and there is an attempt to continue to push outward in those areas.
And so the company doing helping with the pilot is a consultant, or is it?
They're not a consultant, they have created the assessments. And just so you know, when I moved over in March, the PEP teachers had done this research already, because they were already moving in this direction. They gave me 3 different companies. I met with each of a representative from each of the 3 companies, gathered information, brought it back to the PEP teachers. And the company that we decided to go with was one that we were the most familiar with already. Their product was one that we were very familiar with.
And it's viewed as really a gold standard, and it's far more approachable, and it relies less on the language to assess kids. So it evens out the playing field for kids who might be struggling with, the English language in itself.
So that was actually going to be another one of my questions,
I can tell.
but I just want to go on otherwise I'll lose my train of thought. So the district is engaged in curriculum mapping. Is the PEP curriculum, whether it's the core group or the whole class enrichment, is that part of the curriculum mapping project?
That would be part of the curriculum mapping project. The curriculum mapping, as I've said, is certainly one of our primary objectives. I don't want to derail this too much. Because of the many other initiatives taking place this year, portrait of graduate, panorama surveys, computer-based testing, the science investigations, so on and so forth. We're really probably going to do more of a push for wrapping up some of the curriculum mapping for next year rather than getting it done this year. We wanted to do it right, and sometimes to do it right, got to step back. But this is an important curriculum, and the curriculum mapping will help integrate what's happening in PEP with what's happening in the classroom.
I just wanted to understand if it was part of it,
Oh, for
no
sure.
matter when it's, okay, great. So Dr. Kurnick, you mentioned, I'm sorry if I sound like a lawyer, it's just how I speak when I ask my questions, I apologize. So you mentioned that the PEP subcommittee has teachers and administrators, and it's non-PEP teachers, so is it teachers from the whole district? Is it teachers just from elementary school? Is it teachers
Middle school teachers.
from middle school teachers?
As well.
I was just trying to, as well, so the elementary and the middle school. So I'm trying to race through. Okay, so I understand that developing, I've been asking this question probably for about 10 years about the selection criteria. And so I understand that a group has been brought in to help with that, and I'm wondering, the pilot is targeting the kids who are in 3rd grade, but what about the kids who are in 4th and 5th grade? Because it seems as though that
So-
criteria is not
No, we're just not there.
You're not
We
there.
are piloting grade 3.
just to
It
see.
would, so next year, we would then be piloting for grade 4, and the year after for grade 5.
And Dr. Kurnick mentioned this, a real purpose of the pilot, because right now, with the existing structure, you are getting IQ tests only if you've met this, and that. So not everyone is getting that additional data point, those additional data points. So there's, in our view, a little bit of inequity there. By doing the group assessment, everyone on a level playing field, you all have the same number of data points. So that's really a big purpose of these group assessments.
So now to get to the question about the language. I don't know why we have the disproportionality that we do. I don't know if it's about language, I don't know if it's type of test, I don't know if it's cultural, just sitting and listening. So when these tests are given, is there any accommodation for a language barrier? Are they all given in English, are they all given in the same way? Or is there any
There's actually,
accommodation for the students for whom English is not their native language, be they Hispanic or some other?
there's no accommodation, and like, I've only seen the first of the 3, I've only seen the nonverbal. So as you might imagine, nonverbal has no instruction at all, it's on a computer. All 3 assessments will be computer-based. And there's no language at all. So there's no instruction to be read, there's no instructions from the teacher to be given, it is complete, so it's accessible by everyone.
So does language ever pose a barrier in this?
I think the answer to that is no, but I'm gonna have to, the pilot,
Right, see, Dr. Kurnick's talking
no,
about the
no,
pilot.
to the nonverbal, the
Yeah.
pilot, and is the only one that is consistent, we're using,
Right.
because we've taken the nonverbal consistent.
But for the other ones in the pilot,
Right, we'll have to wait.
the design is less reliance on, the language than what's traditionally in the traditional IQ test that we can use.
So can I just, as long as it's the same subject, so I'm not following, if they take a verbal assessment in the pilot and a quantitative assessment, are they given in their home or dominant language?
I'll let you know, because the best that I've been told is that, again, language will not be impacted on any of those assessments.
For the pilot.
For the pilot.
Because of the nature of the assessment.
So even what's considered verbal and quantitative?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the nature of the assessment. It's a regular the gold standard.
Got it. Okay, that's amazing. Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I have just a couple more questions. On the student evaluation scale, and I apologize if I missed this, what is the qualifying score? How does this, because this is probably the most subjective out of everything. So what,
We don't reveal the qualifying score to anyone, including the teachers who fill it out.
so even they don't know?
They don't know the qualifying score.
What the
Right.
do they know, so they don't know what qualifies as a qualifying score, right? Like they have no idea, they're not,
Right.
I understand. Finds that interesting, okay.
We don't want teachers to end up
Fudging
filling out
or-
this form and saying, oh my God, I entered out with 1 point or 2 points short, let me go back. Right, we rely on the PEP teachers to take in all this information, they have the qualifying score. And if they note something that is questionable in their mind, they go back to the teacher on their own, but without, the qualifying score.
I have just one more question. So, given that, given that in order for a teacher to be able to, and these are the classroom teachers, not the PEP teachers who are filling out this
That's
SDS. So given that, I know there's a major push this year for professional development. I appreciate that greatly. I'm not sure how much professional development there was in the past by comparison. But, and I realize this, we're now going forward, but just since we're looking back and comparing subgroups, given that it's the teachers who are filling out these forms, and if there's been a lack of, to no fault of their own, of professional development or knowledge about how to assess gifted and talented students, no matter how you define gifted and talented, I guess maybe there's a national standard, but maybe people, I think, maybe have their own definition. How, because it becomes so subjective, how do we know that those teachers know how to properly assess the students for this program? And I hope I'm
It
stating.
sounds, listen, I think if I know exactly what you're saying, and that's really the professional development in terms of addressing the needs of gifted students, not just from an instructional point of view, but identifying them. And that would include, different ways and the making sure we're training them, if you will, on, which they do, the PEP teachers, show them how to use the form. And keep in mind that elementary teachers, by their nature, they walk around, making sure they're marking about anything, whether it's a gifted, an SES, or whatever, this is what they do. They go through, they make notes of their kids' reading progress, math progress, their group work, whatever it is. So, independents, they're used to sort of identifying and observing and marking down what their students are doing. With that said, we fully recognize the need, just from a consistency point of view. I mean, New York State requires administrators annually to go to be recertified on observations to make sure that, don't forget about this is so, no matter how many years you've been doing it, you get recertified. This is a good approach for any process.
I also want to connect a couple of dots. One is that for ENL students, ENL teachers will often be brought in to help complete the student evaluation scale. Just to make sure if the classroom teacher is student struggling with the language, make sure that we are capturing as much as we can fully about the child. The second is I want to go back to staffing. Having one PEP teacher in every one of the elementary schools helps this process along, right? I don't want anybody to imagine that all of this exists just on paper. There's lots of conversation that takes place between PEP teacher and classroom teacher, right? The PEP teacher gets to see all the children in kindergarten and can, make a mental note and go back to the teacher, and they can be discussing a child who might appear to be gifted and talented. Vice versa, that works as well. So there's lots of crosstalk. There's lots of times that a child is surfaced to the PEP teacher as someone to keep an eye on, to look for, how do we further develop this child. Those conversations exist as well. And this is because the staffing is complete.
I'll take a look.
So, and we have 2 board members here as well, so I'm very aware that we're in kind of time. I'm sorry about that. So that was part of my, one of my questions was about the being fully staffed again, part of the appeal of being fully staffed those years back was that we had PEP teachers that were able to work with our classroom teachers to help within their classrooms for students, both in the class, if they were in core group, but we have this giant bunch of years, K to 3, that we have students that really need the support in the classroom. So I'm hoping that our fully staffed buildings are being able to address a lot of those students who have 4 years of need. Along that line, now that we're fully staffed, is there talk about going back to 3rd grade core group, which is what we had when we were fully staffed before 2012?
Before 2012, just want to make sure I have it. Right, and going back to 2003, we had 1.5 PEP teachers in each of the elementary schools and 2 PEP teachers at Weber. So I'm using language like fully staffed now, but PEP teachers would say, oh no, Ira. Fully staffed was like 2003 version of fully staffed.
True.
So I've asked this question many different times, right? My understanding is that the start of PEP program in 3rd grade was somewhat of a moving target. Meaning, because remember, all of this was connected to identifying students who got through the gate to be individually IQ tested. And that is all one-on-one. So that's based on when those tests can take place, when they can be completed, when we can get scores back. And that there was a creep. So maybe one day, PEP core group started in 3rd grade in September, although I
No,
don't
it
think
was
that ever
like
happened.
February.
Right, so I want to just make sure we're using language, like we're being as accurate as we can. So at its earliest, it was winter of 3rd grade. And even then, there was a creep back, because the data collection just takes time, identification takes time, finding psychologists to come in and do the testing takes time. Actually, the pilot addresses some of this. I don't know that it changes when the core group starts, but the streamlining, I mean, this is one of the reasons too. Look, there is a benefit in terms of identifying a more representative grouping of students, and we hope that the pilot is able to do that. The idea that we can streamline this process, make it faster, I think is also beneficial to everyone involved. Doesn't mean that core group starts in March or April of 3rd grade as opposed to waiting until 4th grade. I don't know the answer to that question, but I just wanted to speak directly to when in 3rd grade so we are now currently seeing 3rd grade as our big data collection year, right? So that could change. We'll see what the streamlining does.
But without additional staffing,
I don't know.
without additional staffing, even if we were to massage the data collection, if you kept the staffing we have right now, adding in core group in 3rd grade takes away from the whole class enrichment.
Oh, it would, we could.
Of course,
Okay.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I'm very happy to see the mention of professional development going forward. That's a recommendation still to be addressed. For teachers working with gifted and talented, in particular, again, because of my concern about these students K to 3 that are really needing support, and having the staff experience professional development for that population would really be a critical improvement. So I'm happy to see that.
I would also just want to add that in the Van Tassel Basket report, one of the recommendations not included here is how do we identify students as early as kindergarten who we think could be gifted or talented, right? How do we identify them? What do we do for those kids in K1 and K1 and 2? That's part of the report, something for us to recognize.
Is there, I didn't see any mention of Math Olympiad at the elementary level?
Math Olympiad at the elementary level is, I want to make sure I get this right, is considered a club and not officially part of PEP.
Okay,
And that's why it's not mentioned.
okay. Okay, I'm trying to rush, forgive me. Dr. Hines, I was really happy to hear you mention in the beginning that while the curriculum is fantastic, I would really like to see the humanities more of a focus. And as an educator, interdisciplinary is the best of everything, right? So, I am asking or commenting, potentially knowing that these fantastic educators are potentially addressing humanities already if they're doing an interdisciplinary approach. So I'm just throwing it out there.
I just want to comment, because Dr. Kernick did allude to this, as when they're working on their, if it's a coding project, they're communicating, right? These are skills of, presentations, communication, collaborations. Those are all these interdisciplinary and sometimes humanities focused skills, and I've seen those in the classroom. So it's not that they're absent. You may not be seeing a history paper as a project, but
Right.
the stuff that stuff is in there.
Yes, that's what I was hoping I would hear. The gold standard of the new pilot approach is the thought, part of the underrepresentation that to be addressed is our twice exceptional students.
That's what we're hoping. We don't know. Yeah, I mean, we'll find out. That's why you do a pilot. You've got your hopes, but you got to go through and do it and see how it works out.
Is the pilot in a particular building? How is it?
All of them.
All the
All third.
Okay. Oh, all third
All
graders.
third graders.
Okay.
Because the pilot doesn't impact who's getting into PEP right now. So it's really an additional lens for us to compare our current selection process with a possible new selection process.
I'm almost. Is the have we looked at the variability of the numbers of students in this program based on growth? And do we understand what that is about? Is it something that we are not aware of?
Yeah, I don't think we really looked at that as part of that. It's funny, as we were going through the snapshot of, this current year, I did have a question. We should have really included more of a historical pattern. We have the data, I just haven't laid it out at the table.
I'm working on historical patterns for the PEP teachers. They've asked for that, and yes, we're aware that the numbers are not the same. And it's part of our program is not to create caps.
It's just a question of is there a reason, are we potentially missing? Why are we picking up so many in one building and not necessarily in another?
We should add that to our, what we're working on.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate as to.
But that's still a thing that we have to do. I thought it was a thing, I didn't know if it was still a thing.
And just to put that into perspective, that's going to impact the whole class immersion. The size of the core group, sometimes core group is so big it needs to be broken into two. And that means that there's twice as much time needs to be devoted to core group, which means the time has to come from someplace else, which is what that's.
Of course, but it to me, it's also a conversation of, there's a disparity in how and who is being identified across the district. So I just wanted to ask if we were paying attention to that.
Clarity as how, not in how, everyone's being identified in a consistent way using the same
No, right. So
strategy. So I don't want
some of the buildings,
you may wind up with more.
Yes.
What is that about?
Yes.
Is it just happens to have more,
Is it the water, like-
liberty or-
I get asked that a lot. Should I change my water system? Yeah. So, okay, so that's my question, is that on the radar of trying to understand?
And that would be part of the really PE, making sure, going back to the
That's where
example
I'm
with the
going.
administrators, we have to get reevaluated by the state, or,
Yes.
recertified by the state, and that we can do evaluations of observations of teachers. It would be the same thing. It's worth having, hey, let's check in, what are you looking for? That doesn't have to be a 2-day PD thing, but it's once you go through it and you have that, at the beginning of the year, all the classroom teachers, maybe speak with the PEPs, here's what you want to look for, a reminder of X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah.
So, okay, so I just,
On using the SES.
yes, okay, so that's where my brain always goes, is to the PD conversations.
Or the water.
Yeah, and the communication piece has historically been an issue in the district in terms of two ways, almost like the district not providing a lot of clear information to the community as a general whole, to the particular families if it's a core group conversation. But overall, the other communication piece is that how, like, as you said, all of the wonderful things that are happening. So the perception that this is massive funding for this very, very tiny population becomes this conversation during budget time of pitting communities against each other or populations of students against each other. And we could go a long way as a district explaining that there is a whole school wonderful experience and these students are having their individual needs and academic needs met through this core group experience.
Right, and that was really our lens for preparing this presentation, to really, here's an overview, talk a little bit about the history and impact over and over again. PEP is, every student in K-5 is impacted by PEP directly. Not at a point of exclusion, but no, they are benefiting from our PEP program. We've got the website has accurate information, it's updated. This presentation gets added onto the website in the PEP section, but the other communication, and I had a conversation, which is really important for us with a parent, and this was a comment that was brought to a board meeting, is, communication of, PEP, especially with the on-ramps beyond third grade. We look at other scores and you're looking at your ELA assessment, you're looking at your math assessment. And we just want to make sure that parents are well aware that those can also be alternative pathways to provide support for getting into PEP in 4th, 5th, 6th grade. So while parents certainly have the right to opt kids out of those state assessments, they should do so knowing that, those assessments can also be used in 4th, 5th, 6th grade as one of those points, one of those areas to get points to get onto PEP if that's something that matters. So it's communicating the impact of how those New York State assessments connect to our PEP program. They're not the only way to get on in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, but they are one point of data. So that's an important communication piece as well.
Well, I'm much happier to see that we are attempting a gold standard because that I'm not sure I trust the validity and reliability of our state assessments in terms of identifying students. We still have 2 board members. I apologize to the room for taking up so much time, but I wanted to ask Rachel.
I'll try to be speedy. But I want to start with thank you. This is the most clear, open conversation on PEP that I have ever witnessed. There are parents sitting in this room who've been watching these conversations for 2 decades, and I'm guessing none of them have ever seen the teacher evaluation scale before and ever heard it explained with this amount of clarity. This has been traditionally a program here that was cloaked in secrecy. It is on the website, but it's so complicated for somebody to parse, and the parent communication has been so bad traditionally. So a parent gets a letter that says, hey, by the way, we're going to actually touch your kid, sign here. The parent signs, then they get a letter that the kid is in, or they get a letter that says, nope, your kid didn't make it. No explanation of anything. So I just want to highlight, this is a sea change. Huge, huge sea change to have this kind of conversation in public, in this communication, where parents can understand the program, and I think parents should understand the program. So I appreciate that tremendously. That said, I have a couple questions. Who's the company that we're using to do this pilot? And I heard Dr. Pernick say it's the same nonverbal abilities assessment. Are the other 2 assessments homegrown, or they're like by this company, or they're part of this company?
Yes.
Okay, and they're not tests done by anybody other than this company?
Correct.
Okay. Who's the company?
We're not revealing the company's name because
There's an irony to the fact that that's following my last
Yeah.
comment. But I'm gonna-
That's a discussion after the pilot is done. Right now, let's get through the pilot and see how effective.
Okay, fair enough. Is the teacher evaluation form that's gonna be used in the pilot and moving forward the same teacher evaluation form?
Yeah.
Or are you, it's the same?
This
form?
is, as of right now.
So I have a question on that one. I heard you say we don't reveal the cutoff number to anybody, including the teachers, because we don't want a teacher to look at it and say, this kid is 1 or 2 points off. If we trust that teachers are qualified to evaluate whether a kid is a gifted kid or not for purposes of this program, why don't you trust them enough to know what the number is and self-check and say, wait a second, I'm giving this kid a score that doesn't get them in, but I actually think this kid should be in? Or are we worried about the opposite happening?
You know, it's a good question. What I immediately flashed to was my experiences grading English Regents exams when I was an English teacher. And what happened in the room when students got a 64, right? 64 is an acceptable score, but it's a failing score. And the instinct is to go back and find a point, right? That's the instinct. So part of the concern is we don't want that to be a factor here. We don't want a student to be 1 point away and have a teacher then go back to find a point, because we feel that that is, that lacks maybe a little bit of integrity to do it that way. So that's part of the concern, right? The score should be the score, and it should be based on what a teacher sees and how they determine where a child scores, and not based on what the final number is, and now I can I go back and redo this.
So all due respect to that answer, there's a big difference between an assessment that tests a child on their studying and their learned knowledge, and an assessment that's supposed to be identifying inherent traits in a child that should push them into a program. These are night and day, right? You can't study for this. You shouldn't be studying for this. Nobody should be prepping their kid for this.
I want to also, I'm sorry, you're going to jump in. I want to also add that the current model, right, to get to IQ testing, you need 2 of 3 data points. 2 of those data points are the student evaluation scale. In the pilot, there is no gate, right? And there are a total of 6 data points, 2 of which are the student evaluation scale, 4 of which are from the
Group testing.
thank you, the group testing. And so we still think that teacher voice is important, but we also, and we don't know yet what to do with all the 6 data points. We're kind of working on that through the pilot, but it will reduce the value of the student evaluation score. They become informative, but they won't have the same weight when they're 2/3 of the way to IQ testing. Does that make sense?
I totally understand it. It's still 2 of the data points,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, I think though, again, to go back to thanking you, like the idea of even looking at and evaluating this program, that also doesn't see change. You know, I was here, and many of the community members and board members were here when the Van Hasselbass report was commissioned and then discussed. And the tone of that conversation was completely different, and it was met with a lot of skepticism. And I actually didn't know until sitting right here today that any of the recommendations had been taken at all. Because we commissioned this report, and I wasn't on the board when it was commissioned, so I don't know what the discussion was, but Dr. Van Hasselbass is an expert in the field. She still is. It's amazing that we commissioned this report, and then we immediately stuck it in a drawer and dismissed it. And so to have it looked at and to hear that some of the recommendations are being looked at is fantastic. And I'm glad we're moving in this direction, and I'm glad we're piloting. And I understand the difficulty of identification, right? Identification has always been an issue here. We weren't even ever willing to discuss the fact that it was an issue. I know it's an ongoing process. There's a lot of biases in this teacher evaluation, but I know you'll move from there.
Right, and if I could, because I know we want to your point, and you mentioned this, in the past, you've never even seen the SES, right? So where you're showing it, you know, there were people concerned, well, should we reveal this, we should reveal it. Our view is, hey, let's get it out there, it's being used, and that's how you have honest conversations. So that is a huge step, and then we could see that within some of the teachers who are concerned, but then they're gonna know, and this and that. It's okay, it's okay. We get professional development, we work it. So the conversations that'll now continue from that, oh, okay, the world didn't stop, it didn't blow up, okay. You know, that's how you move systems forward. So, you know, what this might be in terms of what we communicate and what gets shared next year or 2 years from now may be different from where we are right now. But we are heading in the direction of, you know, greater transparency in terms of what we communicate and what's offered to parents and students.
I don't want to take all the time, so I just have 2 quick comments, you want to update and respond, but Dr. Pernick, you mentioned like the PEP teachers are doing all the data entry. I'm glad you're looking at that because it's also, you know, has been historically a criticism that you shouldn't have the same person evaluating the kids and crunching the numbers as is running the program. Thank you for looking at that. And another aside in here is that you mentioned wanting to look at a clear trajectory for advanced students. Thank you for that as well. I'm hoping that you are looking at more than just PEP when you are doing that. And I'm assuming that we don't mean because of what our philosophy is here, we don't mean we're gonna identify this group and then we're gonna create a trajectory, we're gonna track them all the way through. What you mean is like, how are we serving these children all along the way? And I know I come out philosophically where I think most of you come out philosophically, which is like, we wanna make sure that we're serving kids in the way that is best to serve them. But to do that, there have to be multiple points of entry because kids who have the ability to be challenged more pop at different times and are identified in different ways. Just a suggestion, I think one of the ways that we could do this here is in math, because currently, whether or not a kid gets more challenging math is very much up to the individual classroom teacher, which is dependent on the kind of background the classroom teacher has and the professional development the classroom teachers had, the difficulty of her class that year, how spread thin they are. There's a lot of stuff, it's not consistent from class to class and grade to grade. And then our kids get to 5th grade and another system cloaked in secrecy, we have a few of them identified to take this double skip math test. And then a bunch more who are in accelerated math in 7th grade. Whether they take the accelerated math in 7th or 6th grade, that class for many, many children is like getting hit by a freight train. Not because they can't do math, but because it is the first time that they've been confronted with work that's too hard and that they need to take notes on and study for. And I think that's a way that we need to serve, I hesitate to use the word gifted, because I don't think it's just gifted, I think it's gifted on down through the top half of the class, and also maybe a kid who's just really good at math and is struggling in other ways. We need to serve them by also making school hard for them. Not stressful, hard. And there are many kids, I know we have a conversation ongoing about mental health and not wanting to stress them out, but there are children, many children, not just the gifted children, the layer below as well, for whom challenging them is helping their mental health. And that's what they need. And so I hope, not to give you another assignment, and you did a big assignment, but I'm giving you another assignment, like we need to figure out how to serve them well in the elementary school, pushing on up into the middle school, so that they can be not stressed out, the kids who understand that it's okay to have to work hard at something and struggle to succeed at something.
Thank you, Ms. Gilliard. Ms. Epstein?
I'm mindful of the time. So as a board member, here's what I say. This was a priority this year to do a review of this nature. It is on our strategic plan to continue the review and assessment of it from years 23 to 25. We have a what are we working on? I would like to see that this last page of this piece of paper gets inputted into our strategic plan in addition to any of the other objectives that Dr. Hines or anyone else has talked about here, so that we can make sure as a board, we continue to monitor and progress, because in this conversation, I also heard the other word, money, more staffing, potential other things, which then makes it a budgetary conversation, and if we have those, if we are monitoring this correctly and looking at the data, we are finding out what our academic return on investment is, and we can adequately answer the questions at budget time. So I would appreciate, and I hope the board agrees, and maybe, I don't know if we need to bring this as a recommendation, but that would be my question for this presentation. My only other thing is that as a Board of Education, which was years ago, we approved a bond, we put in STEAM classrooms. At the time we put the STEAM classrooms in, we did not have all K through 5 core curriculum or PEP curriculum pushed into the classroom, but now we do. I hope that we're utilizing, and I know not all of those classrooms have been constructed yet, but I hope that we're utilizing all of those classrooms for all of this interaction and education that's going on, and we continue to and grow them as well and make sure that they have the adequate accoutrements that they need as well.
Thank you. I apologize to the room. I know we have 5 minutes left. I hope we've covered so much of it, but anybody that we may have missed something that would like to comment or ask a question?
I have a couple of questions if I have time for it. I don't want to take up too much time. First, I do want to say thank you. I just want to echo this was incredibly comprehensive. And as a parent who has advocated around these issues, I felt heard. And that's really a big compliment. So going back to Dr. Hines' comment about integrating the humanities into into PEP. I was really pleased to hear that, because it is truly remarkable when you look at the whole class enrichment, at the PEP core group, and also at our curriculum that follows for advanced learners at the middle school level and the high school level, the emphasis on serving students who are gifted or advanced in STEM subjects. It's just huge throughout, and there is just less for students who are gifted or passionate about the humanities. And so I'd love, and maybe there's not really time today, but I'd love to in the future hear more substantively about how that will be accomplished. And I just want to caution against the idea, I love interdisciplinary education, of course it's very important, but if you start from the perspective of saying we have STEM-oriented content, robotics, whatever, and we make it interdisciplinary so that it sort of engages humanities-oriented students, that's great, but also really want to urge you to start with content that is engaging for humanities-oriented students, poetry, writing, history, and find ways to make it interdisciplinary and include STEM-oriented students. So it's a different way of looking at it. You know, I have a college student who is studying to be an archaeologist. She's passionate about history, but there's a lot of science and math that gets involved in learning how to conserve these objects that are found in the ground. So that's just an example. And so it's a question I'm throwing out to be answered at a future time, because I know it's like a complex subject. The other thing would be, I'd love to hear more about where the pilot, we know that there are places around the country that are having more success in identifying students who are ENL or twice exceptional or from under-resourced and underrepresented groups. So is this pilot based on the experience of these school districts that are having more success? Are there school districts that are having success in all of those areas of identification? Or is it just in this school district's doing great in identifying this group and this school district's doing great in identifying that group? Is there a gold standard school district out there that we can be copying? And if so, is the pilot based on that?
I think it's fair to say that there are lots of school districts that are reevaluating how they identify their students for their own pull-out gifted and talented programs. We've been looking at some throughout this process. I can tell you that Herrick's had recently redone their identification process, and that their new process has informed what we are looking at. I think Hewlett Woodmere was another one that had redone their process as well, and so we've been looking at that too. I don't want to misstate it, we looked at a district in New Jersey that had recently done similar. By the way, almost all moved to group testing away from individual IQ testing. So we are copying that 100%. The 3 companies that I spoke to, everyone recommends group testing away from the individualized IQ testing. So we're trying to move along where the other places are going. So that has informed us. We're not traveling in the dark. We are looking at what other districts are doing at the same time. But is there a gold standard for us to copy? I don't think so. I think that the struggle that we're seeing in terms of finding the students who might be gifted and talented from our underrepresented groups, I think that's a struggle that exists everywhere to some extent. And I think it's a pursuit that many other districts are on, just like us.
Another question, sorry, I was like completely confused. With the pilot program, those criteria, is that going to lead to an IQ test or that
No.
will replace it?
In place.
Okay. Because in my mindset, I was always thinking that if we wanted to level the playing field, that we would IQ test everybody.
Well, so this is
I'm
similar.
representing the opposite now.
That's what I know.
It is similar, not the same. The companies would not, they would not describe their tests as IQ
Oh, but
tests.
it's a similar.
But it's
thing
similar,
for everybody.
yes, absolutely.
Gotcha, okay, so that's better then. That is better.
Sorry, related to that, will the pilot for current third graders be used as well as the old assessment for the 4th grade group for next year?
We're just comparing the results to determine if we're going to go forward with
So the
this.
current third graders are gonna be assessed the old way,
Correct,
and the group will be polled the old way.
that's correct.
You'll see what's different.
Correct.
If you find a child that wouldn't qualify for the pilot program, that wouldn't have qualified the old way, what happens to that child?
Well, I mean, my general thinking is that the pilot has got to be the pilot, right? We've made it very clear in this presentation that students will not be accepted into core group if they qualify through the pilot. And I think if we make that door ajar, we're going to throw it open and we're not going to have a pilot anymore. Now we're going to have 2 different identification systems, which I don't think will be anything but confusion. So I would say, unless there's disagreement, I would say no. The only children who get into core group are the ones who qualify with our current model.
And depending on the results of the pilot, that may impact the on-ramp module for
Absolutely.
next year.
Right.
So,
Look at us almost being on time.
I don't think this is answerable in this time period, we just to throw it out there and second what has already been discussed with the idea of success that we're, and academic ROI was also mentioned. I would love to understand how this program, the success of this program is being defined. I appreciate the focus on the entry, but we have to understand what we're entering students into and why. I think that should also inform how we're making the choices. Because it was interesting to see this student assessments done for the very first time. And I'm not sure, I have 2 children in the program, and I don't know how that matches what their experience was. And then if it goes all the way to 12th grade, is the success assessment the number of AP classes, where they get into college, right? I hope that's not actually, but, or not only. So I would love to hear more about that.
You know, as we build that, I'm gonna just take a guess that it's gonna connect directly to the portrait of a graduate. And just on the portrait of a graduate, it doesn't say, you know, how many AP classes a child should have, right? We're looking at something different. I think we would utilize that to figure out trajectory and to look back and say, okay, has this been successful?
I just have a very simple question. When will the community at large or people who don't have children in school hear more about this, any follow-up? Like, when the pilot's completed or when things have been implemented or just, it's been many years getting to this meeting because of pandemic and because of other postponements and delays. When will we hear some more?
Well, I think that would be a good topic of discussion for next year, right, early on. We'll know the results of the pilot, and we're not gonna, and then we can put it on the state of the district, yeah. This is our community, this is the people we are serving, we want to communicate out what we're doing. I feel very strongly about that. So, we're not going to get results and then I'm not going to tell them now. I mean, we came this far, of course, we want to continue the conversation.
Not just the pilot, but the program.
In general,
as a
yeah.
whole, the professional development,
All
all of
of
the
that.
different things you talked about implementing.
Have overview, we're gonna look at college admissions overview, data outlook again, all the stuff that we've already presented on this year. These are not one dealers, right? These are ongoing, sort of state of the district, mini states of the district in these particular areas, to continue to keep people informed.
Thank you.
It's more of just an ask and a comment, I guess, and I know some of you heard from us in the last day. But as we talk about kind of, supporting students who are, in PEP programs and the larger student body, and there's talk in the room about the humanities piece being, really a little bit missing from this equation. I do ask as we look at the curriculum, even going into middle school, we start servicing gifted students or students who are talented in specific areas in STEM, starting in 6th grade with kids who qualify for double skip and then moving into 7th and 8th, that we really strongly consider how we're servicing students who are gifted in the areas of humanities, both, possibly at Weber, and it hasn't been done before, but then really strongly as we look at Schreiber, and I understand there's this honors English class that's gonna be offered for the first time next year, but we are, from what I hear, taking away that piece in the humanities for 9th graders, and to have kids who are not only passionate about the subjects, but who are more than capable of completing higher than grade level work, to remove that opportunity from 9th graders and then just have, even if it is incorporated in PEP, starting in kindergarten and moving up through 6th grade, you're then taking away that challenge, enrichment, support piece for these students from 6th through 10th grade, when you're now eliminating that opportunity, for these students. And, of course, the greater ask is how do we support that in middle school, and can we? But we did have something in place starting in high school, which I'm now hearing is being changed. So it's more of an ask than a question, I guess, but, considering these students, that's a big gap for these kids from 6th to 10th grade now to be challenged, enriched, supported in those areas. And you do have kids who don't qualify for the STEM pieces. So again, to Rachel's point about supporting the mental health of students who really do yearn for that challenge and to be able to engage in subject areas that they're passionate about, it's a really important piece.
So that's a long conversation, but thank you. One of the topics that we were going to be exploring this year that getting bumped is the notion of acceleration throughout the district. We've lost one meeting this year, so we won't be doing that, but we will be doing that next year, looking at different points of acceleration support for our students. So that is something we're concerned about.
And if I can just carry on that, I know that this is a little bit off topic and we're out of time, but I did want to flag sooner rather than later another issue that also impacts these issues of challenging children and meeting their individual needs at the high school level that I think some of you have already heard from parents in this room is the 11th grade health requirement. So just very quickly, it's my understanding that this year, as opposed to prior years, it is being absolutely insisted upon that every single 11th grade child take health their junior year. And as opposed to prior years where there was the option for certain circumstances to push it to 12th grade. So I would submit for this committee that they please, in time, look at this in time to impact students next year, because I currently have a 10th grade student and she's being told that all of these great AP classes and electives that she's super interested in taking may not be possible because the number one priority is health. So if health conflicts with any other class, health class is the priority. And I spoke with her guidance counselor, we had a good conversation, but and I've spoken with other parents, and there just does not seem to be a rationale to me that justifies standardizing the experience that these kids are gonna get in probably the most pivotal year of their education. So it impacts their mental health as kids are stressing about fitting things into their schedule. They're packing their schedules. So my daughter can probably maybe take all her classes, but she won't have a free period for an entire semester while she takes health at all, except for a 30-minute lunch period, which impacts their ability to seek extra help, among other things. The second thing is that it impacts their competition with other students. It's an extremely competitive college landscape. I don't have to tell you guys that. And I'm just not sure, this strikes me as the first time we're coming to a lot of these meetings that a policy is being presented as so inflexible for really no good reason. And it's just like really inconsistent to everything that I've been hearing all of these years about meeting individual needs of children, the whole child approach to education, which I know for a fact is really important to this board and to the administration. So I'd really like you guys to please consider changing this in time to impact students this year, not next year.
So in short, we are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My answer was gonna be longer, but we'll take it.
And also,
That's why I
thank you for
asked.
this wonderful presentation.
And we were only 10 minutes late.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Great
everyone.
job.
Thank you.
I know.